Beal actually plays defense. He's more than just a shooter.
He's more than just a shooter. He's a class guy for the organization. They know he's the better of the two because he's 3 years younger and has 2 less years on his contract than John Wall. And John Wall and Bradley Beal together have proven they can't do but so much. So if you're Ernie Grunfeld and you're cap strapped because of all of these bad contracts, Otto Porter is the highest paid player on the Wizards, you know.
Yeah.
Right now, this year he's getting paid $26 million. You've got to make some kind of change. And if you could get guys in 1-year deals, clear some money off your cap, plus get a talent like Brandon Ingram. If I'm the Wizards, you got to think about doing it, but I wouldn't hesitate to do it if I was the Lakers.
Hold on. You trying to get Ernie Grunfeld fired? Now you gonna trade Bradley Beal for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope?
No. I was talking about the abundance of players and stuff that you can get.
You can get the young guys.
I mentioned Brandon Ingram and Lonzo. How you forget about that?
I'm not trading.
I'm saying, how you gonna bring up one guy? I said 4.
No, but you can't. That's not. I'm not trading Bradley Beal for the potential of Brandon Ingram.
Okay. But you have to break these 2 guys up. You have to trade one of them. You've made up your mind already.
But that don't mean I got to trade him to the Lakers.
That's fair.
No,
That's fair. But no, but I'm asking you, what would your alternative be?
Let me very quickly wrap this up by making you the reporter that you frequently are, as opposed to the pundit that you frequently are. Is there any chance it happens? Is that a realistic possibility?
I think if it's the Lakers, it's a legitimate chance it happens. If it's Ernie Grunfeld and the Wizards, they're highly hesitant because they're very fond of Bradley Beal, not just as a player, but as a person, and he doesn't have the drama with him that Wall has. That's hard to give up.
Ahead of Thursday's draft, Mark, are the Wizards under pressure to get an answer from Bradley before draft night so they can kind of decide what they're doing here?
Well, I certainly think it would behoove them to know definitively what he wants to do. But I think Bradley has $181 million worth of reasons to hold tight and maybe figure everything out later. I'm told as of this morning, there has been no request, even though there's been a lot of speculation that such could take place. We're a couple days before the draft. Obviously, he would be a very, very coveted piece. You know, you hear his name even around Golden State, where they have a lot of assets to move. But as of right now, and I know he has a really good relationship with General Manager Tommy Shepard, and they're pretty open and honest with each other. No trade requests from Beal at this moment.
Yeah, Rachel, and I think the pressure on Washington was right when the season ended, right when they lost in the first round to Philadelphia. And their general manager, Tommy Shepard, came out and said, this is not a run it back type team, right? We're not going to bring back some of the same faces that were on the roster, and they've got 5 or 6 free agents, including players like Robin Lopez, Ish Smith. So for Beal, I think the next couple weeks are going to be critical from the Wizards. It's similar to what we're going to see in Portland, right? As far as the pressure on the organizations to try to build a championship level team. And when you have Beal and Russell Westbrook making $75 to $80 million of your salary, it is going to present a challenge. And as Mark said, with that extension, he's eligible to sign a $180 million extension starting on October 1st. He can get $170 million from another team in the offseason with cap space. So there's not much of an advantage. The advantage comes with that 5 years, $235 million contract that he can sign with Washington, or perhaps if he's traded during the season with his new team.
Yeah, and that's certainly what players on other teams are going to be saying to him. Hey, you can pretty much get almost as much money with us. And we talk about Team USA and the Olympics being such strong recruiting ground. Mark, you mentioned Golden State. I don't know if during training camp, Draymond was in Bradley Beal's ear saying, hey, friend.
You know he was.
Hey.
You know he is.
Hey. Now, Bradley, of course, unfortunately went into the health and safety protocol, so he did not make the trip to Tokyo. He is not with these guys on the trip, but he was with them for 2 weeks in Las Vegas. There's a lot of names that are on a lot of teams that could use a Bradley Beal. So I don't know what conversations were happening behind the scenes. Bobby, I do want to ask you, though, you mentioned some of these contract numbers Bradley is eligible for. As Mark said, he's got 181 million reasons to stay in D.C. But what about from the D.C. side? The last Supermax they gave out was to John Wall. We saw how that worked out. They're still paying Russell Westbrook, who is on a Supermax that he signed in Oklahoma City. Are they really in position? Do they feel like they want to commit that much money to Bradley Beal for these next 5 years if Beal gives them the opportunity to do so?
Yeah, I think if Bradley Beal walked into Tommy Shepard's office today and said, I want to sign that $100 million extension, or let's play it out and I will put my name to 235, I think Tommy would give him a nice handshake agreement. And I think
and a pen.
The Supermax gets, yeah, we know the Supermax gets tricky because, you know, Rachel, what happens is that teams are paying usually for the past,
right,
not much for what the future is. And when we get to, we saw it with Chris Paul, when we get to years 4 and 5, and you're paying a guy $45 to $50 million, and maybe the production is not there, it's tough to continue to build the team. But I think if Bradley Beal gives his commitment to Washington, I think they will gladly sign on the dotted line there.
Well, the good thing with Beal is that he's still younger than a lot of people realize he is. He does have 5 years projected of production ahead of him, and it does pain me to say this because it's my hometown, but Washington, D.C. just has not been a free agent destination. So if you've got a guy like Bradley Beal, I got to think you will do everything and pay anything to keep him, right, Mark?
And Rachel, ironically, just before the pandemic hit, a couple weeks before, I was in San Francisco, the home of the Warriors, having lunch with Bradley Beal, doing an interview with him. And the one thing that he said is he loves Washington. He wants to have a career in Washington. He wants to have his jersey retired in Washington. He wants to be a Wes Unseld type figure with the organization. And perhaps what we just saw from Giannis sticking with it with Milwaukee could give him more motivation to stay in Washington and try to continue his legacy there.
Well, look, we've got the Giannis example on one hand. You've got Draymond Green possibly in your year during training camp. We saw what Draymond Green was able to convince Kevin Durant to do. Yeah, maybe I should. I'm trying to be responsible and say possible.
Bradley Beal is being reported by Bleacher Report that he knows he has a decision to make before the draft about whether or not he will officially request a trade. Jalen, it would behoove the franchise if he did so before the draft to help them with that day. Do you think this happens in the next 48 hours?
And shout out to my brother Shears215. Ain't I Chris today? He even allowed me to borrow his glasses. How about this? So if you're Bradley Beal, when you talk to me about him being moved, you know the first thing I think about? I feel bad for Russ. You know, I feel bad for Russ. His last couple of stops, he got a chance to play with KD, and then he ended up leaving. The team traded Harden. Ain't nothing he can do about that. Go to Houston. Don't really get a chance to play that long again with Harden. Now you get to Washington. Y'all show some promise late in the season, and Bradley Beal may potentially ask for a trade. But here's what I want to make sure I acknowledge for you, David.
What's up?
This is actually a good thing for Russ, because if Bradley Beal requests a trade, that means they talked about it. And if they talked about it, that means Washington can look up, and once training camp starts, there's a good chance that they have a new roster. Is Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook at this point of their careers the future of the Washington Wizards? I ask you, is that the future? Since it's not, you got to go ahead and start laying them dominoes right now if you're their general manager, Tommy Shepard, because both of those guys' value is as high as it's going to get. And you got to sell high in this case.
And there's so many duos in the league, and Jalen, what do I always say about duos? You've heard this a million times. I like my duos to be complementary. While Beal and Westbrook are both great contributors, they're not complementary players to each other. Something tells me they will not be a duo on the Wizards moving forward, but who will get moved, we will see. The question now in the air is, will Kawhi Leonard?
They're going to make, if anything's going to happen, there's got to be a little clarity soon. Where do we stand with this?
Bradley Beal has not told the Washington Wizards that he would like a trade. He has not told them anything, but he is invested in helping them in free agency. And, he's obviously gotten a chance to talk to Wes Unseld Jr., their new coach. Now, there's still time for that to happen. But the mechanism to do a Bradley Beal trade or any trade of a player of that caliber is to do it before the draft, because you want to do it around draft picks. Once the draft passes, it's a lot harder to do that deal, because hypothetically, if you're going to do it with Golden State, you're going to tell the Warriors who the players are. You would like it 7 and 14 if those players are in it. And so, listen, Bradley Beal has known the timetable of this, that if he wanted to be moved, if he wasn't going to sign the extension and decided he was ready to move on, that it really needs to get done before draft night. That doesn't mean he can't still do it, but right now the Wizards are preparing for draft night, and they're preparing for free agency. And certainly Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook are, part of their plans for next season.
You mentioned Golden State. Bradley Beal is in his prime, still way younger than people realize because he came into the league so young. Sensational player, great shooter. It's not just going to be Golden State if it ever happens. I think there will be so many teams that try to get into this. I think Boston makes sense, Miami makes sense, Golden State, Philadelphia. We can go on and on. We can start with the Warriors because you mentioned in the prior segment. To me, if I'm Washington, unless I love James Wiseman, unless I love him, and that's a game changer if I love him. Wiseman, 7. Good pick, not a great pick. 14, and Wiggins, unless I love Wiseman, that's not an incredible offer to me if I'm the Wizards. I'm asking for Warriors, you got to give me 2026 unprotected and a swap. And the Warriors, then you could flip, what are the other teams going to offer, right? Tyler Hero's value from Miami, I think, is a little lower. They're encumbered with first-round picks. Is Boston going to offer Jalen Brown? I don't think so. To me, there's not much point in giving up one star for another if you're Boston. So you start to suss out what is the marketplace going to look like. Golden State can reasonably look at it and say, hey, even if you don't love our offer, go get something better.
That's exactly right. And with 1 year left on his deal, Beal has leverage because the team trading for him wants to know that he wants to be there and plans to resign. But I also think because of the kind of player and person Bradley Beal is, I think there are teams who might not be in glamour markets who would look and say, if we win, that we could sell Bradley Beal on winning and stay in a situation where we could be really good. That isn't an LA or a New York or a Chicago, Boston, Miami. So I do think the teams out there, there'd be a wide pool. Everybody in the league would love to have Bradley Beal. Listen, he's been very loyal to Washington, and he is.
And it's legit. It's not fake.
He loves it.
And wants to win.
Listen, there are some players who look for reasons to leave and some players who look for reasons to stay. He has always been about finding reasons to want to stay there. And certainly they can sign him to the Supermax next season. There's a giant extension awaiting him if he wants to do it. I think he has legitimately been torn, and he's always been looking for reasons to stay there. He loves that organization. He loves that city. But he wants to win, and he's got to look at the landscape with that roster.